My wife put it out there for the whole world to see. He's losing everything. Glass of champagne in hand. She was already toasting our divorce before the ink had even dried. Her book club friends applauded. Her personal trainer, also her boyfriend, grinned like he'd won a prize. Her attorney promised her a fortune. What they didn't realize was that I'd been quietly arranging the board for 2 years while they were still figuring out the rules. By the time Dolores, Dolly to most, realized the match had shifted, I already had checkmate. I'm Vin Harmon, 61, married to Dolly for 32 years. We live in Medford, Oregon. I spent the bulk of my working life as a Forest Service consultant before moving into private land management. Dolly has always been the social butterfly, PDA president, book club leader, the kind of woman who knows everyone's business and isn't shy about broadcasting it. The day the ground shifted under us started like any other Tuesday. I was in my home office going over timber assessment reports when my phone buzzed with a Facebook alert. Quincy, our son 24, had tagged me in a comment. I tapped the notification. There she was. Dolly, oversized sunglasses from our last Cabo trip perched on her nose, champagne flute in hand, grinning like she'd hit the jackpot. Her caption read, "Finally free. Divorce papers filed today. He's the one losing it all, not me. Time to start living. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag freedom." 43 likes, 11 laughing face reactions. Comments flooding in from her book club crowd. "You go, girl. About time. He never deserved you." I set the phone down slowly, as if it might explode if I moved too fast. A metallic bitterness filled my mouth. Not exactly shock. More like confirmation of what I'd suspected for a while but wished wasn't true. I'd been picking up fragments of late-night conversations, changes in how she dressed, in how she carried herself, like she was auditioning for someone else's life. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she had. While she was curating her social media narrative, I'd been meeting discreetly with Vernon Thatcher, an old army buddy turned lawyer. While she was selecting champagne flutes for her big reveal, I was quietly shifting assets and setting up trusts. Dolly always saw me as the quiet handyman, the steady bill payer. What she missed entirely was that the same methodical thinking that made me good at forest management made me even better at long-term strategy. And I'd been strategizing. I called Vernon. He picked up on the second ring. "I saw it," he said immediately. "She went public. Like fireworks on the 4th, I replied. "Think she's ready for what comes next?" He gave a dry chuckle. "She hasn't got a clue." 18 months earlier, on a rain-soaked Thursday night, the first Real crack appeared. I dozed off in my recliner watching the Blazers game, my back aching from a day surveying timber near Crater Lake. The only sounds were rain against the windows and the occasional snap from the fireplace. Then I heard her voice from the kitchen, low, almost conspiratorial. "Trust me, Wanda, he has no idea what's coming," she said into the phone. Her tone had that smug edge she used when she thought she was being clever. "He's so predictable, so comfortable. Still thinks this is just a rough patch." I stayed motionless. Hunting instincts. Don't move, don't breathe, just listen. The trainer I mentioned, Brock, says I should wait until after our anniversary. 33 years means a bigger settlement, she continued. My blood went cold. Wanda Pratt, her younger sister, had been through 3 divorces and had opinions about men that could strip paint. If Dolly was workshopping strategy with Wanda, this wasn't a passing mood. This was a campaign. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," Dolly said with a laugh. "Let him think he's the clever one with his little consulting business and his timber investments. He has no clue I've been documenting every account, property, and asset he thinks he's hiding." She went on for 10 minutes. Details about Brock, about timing the divorce for maximum leverage, about liquidating and staking her claim. When she finally hung up, I waited 20 minutes before waking up naturally, stretching, yawning, playing the part. "Hey there, sleepyhead," she said, stepping in with a cup of tea. "Good game." "Not bad," I replied, studying her face. She looked exactly as she always had. How was book club? Oh, too much talking, not enough reading. She kissed my forehead. I'm heading to bed. Don't stay up too late. I sat in that chair until nearly 2 a.m., rain still pattering against the glass. That night, I started a different kind of journal. No feelings, just hard facts. Dates, times, overheard conversations, observed changes. The next morning, I called Vernon. We'd served in the Rangers in '82. After discharge, he'd gone into estate law. More importantly, he understood that preparation could mean the difference between survival and defeat. Vern, I said when he picked up, I've got a hypothetical question about protecting assets. Hypothetical, huh? He said. Funny thing, those questions tend to get real fast. Vernon's office was in a restored Victorian on Main Street. No flashy signage, just a brass plate. Thatcher and Associates Estate Planning. Inside smelled of leather and quiet confidence. Coffee, he offered, moving with the same economy of motion he had in uniform. Black, I said, settling into a chair worth more than most mortgages. I told him everything. Every overheard word, every change in Dolly's behavior. He listened without interruption, jotting notes. Timeline, he asked. She's waiting until after our anniversary. 8 months away. Good. Time's on our side. Assets. I slid over a folder. House worth $450,000. Cabin on the Mackenzie River at $280,000. My consulting business, steady 6 figures. Retirement accounts totaling $800,000. And 47 acres of timberland near Mount Hood. $500,000 in timber value alone, with huge development potential. Vin, he said finally. What I'm suggesting is legal, but it requires precision and patience. Can you handle that? I've been patient for 32 years. 8 more months won't kill me. Over the next 2 hours, he laid out a plan. Elegant, unyielding. An irrevocable trust funded through my business. The timberland transferred to a conservation LLC with me as unpaid advisor. The cabin moved to Quincy through a qualified personal residence trust. What about my overseas accounts? Yes. His pen paused. Kuwait contracting work 2003, I explained. Kept about $200,000 in Swiss banks. Fully reported, all legal. Dolly doesn't know. Vernon smiled for the first time. She's about to find out there's a lot she doesn't know. Walking back to my truck, I felt something I hadn't in months. Control. She thought she was the chess master. She didn't realize I'd been studying the board for decades. The next 8 months became an exercise in patient dismantling. Every Tuesday, I met Vernon for lunch. 2 old soldiers over coffee and pie to anyone watching, but in truth, orchestrating a flawless asset protection campaign. First, the timberland, donated to the Pacific Northwest Conservation Trust, complete with a $15,000 environmental impact study to cement its protected status. Even if she contests it, the state will fight to keep it, Vernon said. 2 weeks later, the cabin. Quincy balked at first. Dad, I don't want to be part of a scheme. This isn't a scheme, son. It's protecting what 3 generations built from someone who sees it as liquidation cash. I showed him the trust papers. Ownership transferred to him immediately, but I retained use for 15 years. What if Mom fights it? She can try. This was set up 18 months before divorce talk. Vernon made sure of that. Restructuring the business took finesse. Cascade Resource Management LLC. Me as managing partner. Vernon's firm holding the operating agreements. Technically, I became an employee of my own company. The Swiss accounts. Those were the easy part. Established years earlier, quietly fed with consulting fees. I'd been shifting funds into cryptocurrency portfolios run through the same Swiss banks. Bitcoin's unpredictable, Vernon warned me during one of our Tuesday lunches. So is divorce court, I said. At least with crypto, I hold the keys. By the time Dolly filed, what she believed was $1 million marital estate had been whittled down to little more than the balance in our joint checking account and her car. Everything else sat behind layers of legal protection that made Fort Knox look like a child's piggy bank. The beauty of it wasn't just in the asset sheltering, It was the paper trail. Every transfer, every trust setup, every corporate restructure had been completed months before she'd ever breathed the word divorce. Vernon had ensured even the most aggressive lawyer would run headlong into airtight legality. 3 days before our anniversary, Quincy texted me. "Dad, she's asking about the cabin. Wants to know if you've given me any gifts lately." I wrote back, "Tell her the truth. You own a conservation cabin outright, with a 15-year use restriction." Sometimes the truth hits harder than any lie. The Riverside Cafe was the kind of place Medford's social set used to parade themselves. Overpriced salads, snobbish wine lists, and gossip potent enough to fuel half the town's rumors. Exactly the sort of venue I expected to see Dolly reveling in what she thought was her victory lap. I hadn't planned to be there. I was headed to the hardware store when I spotted her silver Lexus in the parking lot. On impulse, I parked across the street and slipped into the coffee shop next door. From a table by the window, I had a perfect view of the cafe's outdoor seating. There she was, presiding at a table with 4 other book club regulars. Lacey Winters, wife of the town's biggest car dealer. Janet Collins, married to the mayor. Rebecca Stone, whose family had been in timber since the Oregon Territory days. And at the center, my soon-to-be ex-wife, dressed in a coral blazer I'd never seen, brandishing a champagne flute as if conducting an orchestra. I ordered a black coffee and pretended to scroll my phone while the half-open window carried their voices. "The lawyer says I can expect at least 60% of everything," Dolly announced, her voice laced with smugness. "Maybe 70, given the length of the marriage and his income." Lacey leaned in. "What about the cabin? That's got to be worth a fortune." "Oh, that's mine too. Community property. Same as the timberland and his precious consulting firm." Rebecca raised her glass. "Here's to finally getting what you deserve, honey." They clinked glasses, laughter bubbling like schoolgirls with a secret. The irony was so thick it could have been sliced. Dolly was celebrating before the first shot of the real battle had even been fired. "And Brock," Janet teased. "How's that working out?" Dolly's smile grew. "Let's just say I'm learning what I've been missing. A real man who knows what he has." "Good for you," Lacey chimed in. "Vin never seemed like he had much spark. That one hit harder than I'd expected." 32 years of marriage, and now I was reduced to lifeless furniture in her retelling. I drained my coffee and headed for the truck. On the drive home, I called Vernon. "They're feeling pretty sure of themselves," I told him. "Talking about 60–70%. Confidence is a wonderful thing," he said. "Right up until it collides with reality. When do we show them reality?" "Soon," he replied. "Very soon." 3 days after her filing appeared in the courthouse records, Dolly was sorting her closet. 3 piles. Keep for the new life, donate, and burn because it reminds me of him. Quincy told me later he'd stopped by while she was mid-sort, still playing the dutiful son though he knew what was coming. Her phone rang. She hit speaker. "Franklin Accounting," a woman's voice said. "This is Patricia Franklin. I need to go over some issues with your financial disclosure forms." Dolly barely looked up from the sweater in her hands. "What kind of issues?" "Well, several of the accounts you listed, we can't access them." That made her pause. "What do you mean, can't access?" "For example, the timberland. County records show it was transferred to a conservation trust 14 months ago. You're not listed as a beneficiary." "That's impossible," Dolly snapped. "That land's been in Vin's family for generations." "It still is, technically. But it's held by the Pacific Northwest Conservation Trust. Your husband is listed as an unpaid environmental consultant, not the owner." "What about our cabin?" "That's even more complicated. Legal ownership went to your son Quincy through a qualified personal residence trust. Your husband retains usage rights for 15 years. But what? You have no legal claim to it at all." Quincy later told me she sat down hard on the bed, pale as paper. "And the consulting business?" she asked quietly. "Restructured as an LLC. Your husband is listed as an employee, not owner. The operating agreements are Complex. What does that mean for my settlement? Long pause. Based on verifiable marital assets, you're looking at roughly $40,000 plus your vehicle. Silence stretched until Patricia asked, Mrs. Harmon, are you still there? 40,000, Dolly whispered. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you expected. You should meet with your attorney. After the call, Quincy said she just stared at the clothes she'd been so sure she'd wear in her champagne-soaked future. Now she'd be lucky to afford boxed wine. The knock on my door came at 7:30 on a Thursday night, just as I'd settled in with a beer and the news. Through the peephole stood a lean man with weathered features and graying hair, the kind of face that had seen both hard work and harder living. Mr. Harmon, he said when I opened up. My name's Clifford Barnes. We need to talk. Something in his posture tugged at a sense of familiarity. Not him exactly, but pieces of him. The jawline, the set of his eyes. What can I do for you, Mr. Barnes? He handed me a manila envelope. Got your address from one of those Ancestry DNA services. Turns out we're related. My stomach dropped. I'd sent in a DNA kit 6 months ago. Quincy's idea. I hadn't expected it to dig up anything like this. Related how? According to the results, Clifford said I was his father. I looked harder. Now that he'd said it, I could see it. The nose, the way he leaned forward slightly, ready for anything. Come inside, I said. Not a porch conversation. In the living room, he laid it out. His mother, Rebecca Martinez, was a woman I'd dated briefly in 1985 before meeting Dolly. We'd split when I was transferred to a logging job in Alaska for 8 months. What I didn't know, Rebecca was pregnant. She passed 3 years ago, Clifford said. Cancer. Before she died, she told me who my father was, but didn't want to disrupt your life. Why now? Asked. He pulled up Dolly's Facebook post on his phone. Saw this. Figured if you're divorcing, you might want to know you've got family in your corner. We talked for 2 hours. Clifford worked construction in Portland, had 2 kids, and carried not just my features but my practicality and distaste for drama. I'm not here for money, he said as he left. Got my own. But if you need anything, you call. After he was gone, I sat with the DNA report in hand. Dolly had no clue. She wouldn't unless I told her. And the timing. Remarkable. Just when she thought she had a perfect map of my life, the universe threw in a surprise. Family in an unexpected form, showing up exactly when needed. The call came at 2 a.m. Saturday, jolting me awake. From the guest room, Dolly's phone rang until she finally answered. Wanda, she mumbled, voice thick with sleep. What's wrong? Even down the hall, I could hear the panic in Wanda's voice, though the words were garbled. Whatever she said made Dolly shoot upright. Slow down. You're at the hospital. Which one? More frantic chatter. I'll be right there, Dolly said, moving around in the dark. She left without a word to me. Wanda Pratt, Dolly's younger sister, had been in and out of hospitals for 2 decades, thanks to addiction and mental health spirals. If she'd landed there again, it was either another overdose or another suicide attempt. The next morning I called Quincy. Your Aunt Wanda's in the hospital. Your mom drove to Portland last night. What happened this time? Don't know. But the timings. Interesting, isn't it? He went quiet. You think it's connected to the divorce? Your mom's been confiding in Wanda. If Wanda's been talking to the wrong people or feels cornered. I didn't need to finish. Quincy knew how unpredictable his aunt became under stress. 3 days later, Dolly came home looking a decade older. Red-rimmed eyes, unwashed hair, moving like she was carrying a load far too heavy. How is she? I asked, playing along. Detox, Dolly said flatly. Again. She said some things while she was high. About us. About the divorce. Waited. She might have called your lawyer, Dolly admitted. Might have said things she shouldn't have. They were lies. Dangerous ones, the kind that could damage both of us if they surfaced. Still, I'd already considered the fallout. If Wanda had ever reached out to my legal team, Vernon would have documented every single word. And if her words contradicted Dolly's official version of our marriage, that would be yet another nail in the coffin she seemed intent on building for herself. The morning of our mediation hearing, the Jackson County Courthouse felt like an arena before a fight. Dolly swept in wearing a sleek black power suit that probably cost more than a month's rent for most people, trailed by her attorney, Leland Moss, who looked like he wished he could be anywhere else. I arrived with Vernon and a single manila folder. Judge Patricia Stone, our mediator, was in her 60s and radiated no-nonsense authority. She'd seen enough messy divorces to last a lifetime. She began by listing Dolly's demands: 60% of all marital assets, alimony, and sole ownership of what she called the family properties. "Mr. Moss," Judge Stone said, "please present your client's asset inventory." Leland shuffled through his papers, clearly uncomfortable. "Your Honor, we've run into some complications in assessing the assets." Vernon leaned forward. "If I may, Your Honor, we'd like to address those complications head-on." He slid a heavy binder across the table. Judge Stone flipped through the first few pages, her eyebrows climbing higher. "Mr. Moss," she said slowly, "were you aware that the timberland your client claims was transferred into a conservation trust 14 months before any divorce proceedings began?" Dolly's face drained of color. "That's impossible. That land's been in Marvin's family for generations." "It's still in the family, Mrs. Harmon," Vernon replied evenly. "Just not yours. Legal title was placed in your son's name through a qualified trust arrangement." Judge Stone kept reading. "And this consulting business, restructured as an LLC with complex ownership agreements. Mr. Harmon is now technically an employee. What about the cabin on the Mackenzie River? Also transferred to their son," Vernon said with a faint smile. "Mr. Harmon retains usage rights, but Mrs. Harmon has no legal claim." The silence that followed was heavy. Dolly's self-assured expression faltered as the truth settled in. Every asset she'd planned to seize, every possession she'd boasted about to her friends, had been moved far beyond her reach long before she filed for divorce. But Vernon wasn't finished. "Your Honor, one more thing. We have evidence that Mrs. Harmon's sister, Wanda Pratt, contacted our office while under the influence of controlled substances. She gave information suggesting Mrs. Harmon fabricated parts of her account of the marriage." He played a recording of Wanda's slurred phone call, where she admitted Dolly had been plotting the divorce for over 2 years and intentionally provoking fights to stage false abuse claims. Judge Stone's eyes hardened. "Mrs. Harmon, do you have anything to say about this?" Dolly stared at the table as if willing it to swallow her whole. "Based on the evidence," Judge Stone continued, "I rule that the contested assets were legally transferred before divorce proceedings began. Mrs. Harmon's settlement will be limited to her personal vehicle and any funds in accounts solely in her name." When we stepped out of the courthouse, Vernon clapped me on the shoulder. "So, how's it feel to be a free man, MV?" "Feels like justice," I said, watching Dolly and her attorney bicker in the parking lot. "Like I finally switched from playing checkers to playing chess." 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood on the deck of my cabin, legally Quincy's now but still my home, watching the Mackenzie River flow as it had for a century. The air was crisp with autumn, carrying the scent of pine and possibility. Clifford had driven down from Portland with his kids to meet their newly found grandfather. We'd been taking things slowly, learning that blood alone doesn't forge a bond. Respect and honesty do. "Dad," Clifford said, joining me at the railing with coffee in hand. "Still feels strange saying that." "Feels strange hearing it," I admitted. "But in a good way." His son Tyler, 16 and already showing a knack for mechanics, was down by the river teaching his younger sister to skip stones. Quincy was with them, effortlessly filling the role of older cousin. "Whatever happened to Dolly?" Clifford asked. I took a thoughtful sip. "Last I heard, she's renting a place in town. Brock, the trainer, disappeared a couple weeks after the settlement hit the news. Funny how money troubles can change a man's love life." Meanwhile, the cryptocurrency portfolio I'd built through Swiss accounts had exceeded expectations. Bitcoin's value had nearly doubled in the 6 months since the divorce, making my decision to convert traditional assets seem smart rather than paranoid. But the real win wasn't financial. It was watching my family, old and new, gather without the toxic weight of someone who'd only seen us as assets to cash out. Grandpa MV. Tyler called from the riverbank. "Come show us how to make a real campfire." I smiled, remembering my grandfather teaching me the same thing on this very stretch of river 6 decades earlier. Some traditions were worth defending, especially from people who saw heritage only as something to divide and sell. Earlier that week, Vernon had updated me. Wanda was back in rehab, this time court-ordered after her hospital confession triggered a welfare investigation. Leland Moss had apparently learned the hard way about doing proper due diligence. And me. I'd learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something stronger from what someone else tried to destroy. That evening, the Cascade Mountains glowed gold and orange under the setting sun. I realized this, not court victories or financial maneuvers, was the true definition of winning. Family gathered around a fire, sharing stories, and knowing the important things had survived untouched. Dolly had thought she was ending my life. In reality, she'd freed me to see what it could be without constantly trying to please the wrong person. That night, with 3 generations of men laughing under a blanket of stars, I knew some battles are worth fighting. Not for what you might gain, but for what you refuse to lose.